Hello, welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, and this week it comes from Lee Wilmot, formerly of Reach PLC, but now an editor over Give Me Sport. Most importantly, for our episode, a long-suffering Tottenham Hotspur fan. Lee, you well? You good?
I'm all right, thank you. Yes, just quickly, did you have that intro when I've been on the podcast before, or is that new?
That's new. I wanted to let the people know where you've gone.
Oh, it's nice. Yeah, no, I meant the black and white intro. I don't remember that being on last time.
Oh, you mean the funky theme music that we all danced to in the green room? Yeah. No, I don't know. We've had it since maybe the middle of last season. So I don't know if you or one of your colleagues came on to provide the Spurs insight the last time out.
Fair play. Yeah, I liked it. Loved it. Enjoyed listening to that as before you introduced me. But yeah, I'm okay. Now at Give Me Sport, trying to just improve their coverage and get things moving on there. But yeah, still long-suffering Tottenham fan and very much suffering right now.
I was going to say, if everything to have changed, the new theme music, your role, company, and what have you, one thing that hasn't changed, the title of long-suffering Spurs fan. And I could try and get people to watch right until the end to ask you the killer question that everyone's maybe come to this episode for, but I'm just going to do it now. Is Thomas Frank in danger of losing his job if Newcastle thump Spurs on Tuesday?
Well, did you mean to say when Newcastle thump Spurs? Because that's what always happens at St James's Park. Do you know what? I think he really is. I don't know what else or who is what. I don't know who else there is out there that we would go for right now. It's a very weird time to kind of be making a manager change. I think with January just around the corner, it's one of those where you would think he is under pressure, but you might want to at least give him January to try and overhaul the squad and put more of his stamp on things. But yeah, it's the whole season's not been great, mate. We've ground out results somehow up until the last week or so when things have really gone south. And yeah, the fans were getting on his back. The fans have been getting on the players' back, which I'm not a massive fan of. But it's not great in the club right now. The disconnect between the fans and the team has grown again, and it's really really worrying.
One of the criticisms that I read about Thomas Frank, I think is a really good manager, is that at Brentford, he had the whole week to prepare for the game coming up, and that was where that flexibility in terms of tactics and approach kind of came to its own. Whereas here, he hasn't got that time on the training ground, and yet he still looks like he wants to apply that flexibility to who Spurs are facing. So if I was to ask you, how are Spurs going to approach tomorrow, are you like, well, actually, you don't quite know because there isn't a defined style of play yet?
No, exactly that. And this is one of the things where I get frustrated with the supporters as well, because and pundits in that regard, that we've gone from a manager in Ange Postecoglou who had a set philosophy, a set way of playing. It was his way or the highway, and he wasn't a man for changing for anyone who would criticize him or ask questions about his approach. And we'll all remember that 4-1 defeat to Chelsea at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where that ridiculous high line with 9 men and almost could have got something from the game, but he carried on playing that way. He wasn't going to stick men behind the ball. He was going to play his way, and that was that. He got criticised a lot for that, for not adapting the way he plays. And now we've got a manager who adapts the way he plays depending on the opposition he plays. And people don't like that either. So it's like, you're kind of in a lose-lose situation as a manager, I think, in some regards. But you're absolutely right in the fact that people talk about Tottenham being a big club. Are we a big club? Are we the big six? That's what we're called now. And you wonder why Newcastle aren't part of that shake-up if Tottenham are in there, because I feel like the two clubs are very similar in kind of stature and history. So we are termed as a big six club, a big club. So we should have the quality and the strength in depth to be able to play whatever way we want to and not have to worry about the opposition, but that's not the case. And then you also think about where we're going and what we're doing as a big club. Thomas Frank has had to come in from a smaller club and is not used to this kind of pressure, as it were, and this kind of need to get results immediately. He won't be given the time that he had at Brentford. If things continue to go the way they're going at the minute, he is in real danger of losing his job.
And what is the main flaw, do you think, at the moment of Thomas Frank? Is it that tactical flexibility not paying off? Is it, I mean, because I looked at some of the highlights in recent weeks, and we've had what seems like a real lack of discipline, both in game and then out of the game. You know, players walking off down the tunnel, not shaking hands, and not going over to the fans. And that hasn't pleased. It just seems to be a series of things which are kind of coming to a head now.
Yeah, so he came in and solidified the defence, which was desperately needed. The defence was so bad under Ange Postecoglou; it needed someone to come in and just really take it by the scruff of the neck and say, right, we're gonna play this defence. We're gonna play a bit more strategically and make sure we're solid at the back. Because let's be honest, that's where you kind of, defence is the best form of attack. Sometimes you need to start there before you can think about moving forward. And he did that. And the early weeks of the season, we weren't conceding as many goals. We were nice and solid, and we were focused on the set pieces. And that was fine. And then you kind of hope, right, now he's done that, can we think about what we're going to do going the other way? Can we think about moving forward and those real attacking patterns of play? And it feels like he's, at the minute, not able to do both. We're conceding goals left, right and centre at the minute, perhaps in an attempt to be more attacking. But we can't then shut the door at the back while trying to do that. It's very strange. I don't know quite how he's going about things. The Arsenal game was atrocious. From a Tottenham standpoint, a North London derby, the biggest game that every single fan looks to in the season, or the biggest two games. And we had, a 0.07 XG from 90 minutes, which is just unforgivable. And that came off the back of losing at home to Chelsea in probably the second biggest game of the season that fans look to. And we had a 0.1 XG at home to Chelsea, just awful. And then then things flipped a little bit. I tweeted on Wednesday that we'd lost 5-3 to PSG in the Champions League, but I felt positive. And as you would expect, there were a few fans that came back at me and like, how can you be positive? We just shipped 5 goals. That's 9 goals in the last 2 games. We've lost a game, blah, blah, blah. You can't be positive. But what I'd seen in that 5-3 game, the high press, getting at PSG, the energy, the intensity, and the will to get forward and score goals. Yes, we did concede a couple of really sloppy goals. We probably could have walked out of there with a draw, and probably should have walked out of there with a draw, which would have been a great result. But we conceded a couple of really sloppy goals and lost 5-3. But I was positive then that kind of it felt like after Arsenal, he'd got the message and think, right, I need to really think about how we're gonna attack teams, how we're gonna press teams, how we're gonna get forward. And then we come to Fulham on Saturday night, and it's back to square one again.
I was watching his post-match interview against Manchester United. Just remind me of the score. Was it a draw?
Yeah, 2-2 draw. Yeah.
And what really annoyed me as a football fan, and I actually texted one of my friends who supports Tottenham and raised it with him, was how he sounded. He sounded like a small club manager in terms of he was talking up the Manchester United players, and I think Spurs managed to restrict them to something like 4 shots or something. He read the stat out, and I was thinking, you're at home against a side not in great form, and you're celebrating the fact that you've managed to restrict them to, 4 or 5 shots, whatever it was. I'm thinking that's not the words of a manager who can manage it in a big club. And I don't know if it was me just looking at it a little too deeply, but it kind of, if I was a Spurs fan, I would have been absolutely fuming at his reaction after a game like that.
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. And to be honest, we should have won that game in the end. But it was only a kind of like 10, 15, 20-minute spell in that second half where we got on the front foot and got the 2 goals because we were 1-0 down and turned it around to 2-1 and then threw it away with the last kick of the game, which was classic Tottenham, to be honest with you. After Richarlison had taken his shirt off and celebrated what he thought was the winner, which is classic Richarlison. But yeah, you're right. It's the focus has got to be on Spurs rather than what the opposition are doing, how they're coming to play. It's got to be on, right, we're going to play our way. We're going to go and do our thing. We're going to do, this is how we're going to set up. And if if the opposition team comes and plays a different way and we have to change things in match, then we change things in match. But I think we need to set up and worry about ourselves before we start worrying about anyone else.
Yeah, because that was the point I was going to make. If he's sitting there kind of pre-game and that's his approach to Tuesday night at Newcastle United, then that just plays in Newcastle's hands, because it was almost like he was grateful to get the point, and like he was actually celebrating the fact that they restricted him to, I don't know, like say it was 6 shots or whatever. It's like, what are you doing? Like, are you not in this game to win it? Like, what are you celebrating that for? And if he applies the same approach to Tuesday, then Newcastle United should get all 3 points, hopefully. Just on the discipline point that I mentioned, because I think it's quite an interesting one. I think it was Jed Spence refused to shake the manager's hand as he walked down the tunnel. There's been a few examples of players having to push other players towards the fans. Is the bad form and the results starting to creep into the kind of attitude and feeling within the dressing room, and that's starting to show now in public, do you think?
I think it might be. It's the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium can be a rough stadium at times. If the players aren't performing, the fans can get on the players' backs quite quickly. And I suppose currently they've every right to. 3 wins in 21 or something at home, stretching back, which is just madness, absolute madness. So you can kind of forgive the fans a little bit for that, but that creeps in. The fans get on the players' back. The players don't know why they do know why they're getting on their back, but they can't kind of quite understand the vitriol behind it sometimes. So then it creeps into the fans like getting angry and doing their own thing, and kind of it does feel like, as I said at the beginning, a kind of real disconnect between the players and the fans at the moment.
The first question I asked you was about if Newcastle thump Spurs, is he in danger of losing his job? We've seen in recent weeks Eddie Howe go through a bit of a rough time, but you could quite easily put 95, 98% of fans are still fully behind him, and obviously results have started to turn for the better in recent games. Can you say that about Thomas Frank? Because it feels like he wasn't maybe first choice for a lot of Spurs fans.
No, you might be right there. I don't know how many Spurs fans really saw him as the man to change things after Ange. But there was a lot of love for Ange. Obviously, we won the trophy at the end of last season. Yes, we finished 17th in the Premier League. So there was kind of conflict, I think, in the fan base as to whether we actually wanted to see Ange go or wanted to give him another chance again. Then coming in, it's always going to be difficult then for a man like Thomas Frank to come in. And I think people did see what he'd done at Brentford and were positive in terms of the kind of taking Brentford into an established Premier League team, and the football at times is easy on the eye at Brentford. When he wasn't coming up against kind of a big 6 club, I think Brentford did play attacking, exciting football. He obviously changed his ways for the likes of Spurs, Chelsea, Arsenal, and became a bit more defensive and counter-attacking. But I didn't see an issue with bringing Thomas Frank in. I think he's a really likeable guy, and I think he knows what he's doing. But it's going to be an interesting few days, because after Newcastle on Tuesday, it's Brentford, his old club, at the weekend, who are doing all right without him, aren't they? It could be an interesting few days at Spurs.
Yeah, they're doing really well. Just to remind the ladies and gents, this episode is sponsored by NORD VPN. The link is in the podcast description box. Get yourself a discounted offer on your NORD VPN plan. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. 1 subscription, 10 devices. Keep yourself safe while browsing on public Wi-Fi, whether that be on the train, on the bus, cafe, or restaurant. NordVPN offers an added extra element of security against the potential hackers lurking in the shadows. So support the podcast and keep yourself safe while online as well. Now, interesting.
NordVPN.
I was going to say one thing that hasn't changed. I genuinely thought about introducing the NordVPN sponsorship like that. One thing that hasn't changed since you've left is we've still got these lovely sponsors on board, which is great. Thanks, Nord. Interestingly, away from home, Spurs aren't too bad. I'm looking at the form table in the Premier League for the last 6 games away, and they lie second, 4 wins out of the last 6. So the first kind of 10 minutes, 15 minutes of this episode for you have been rather depressing, I would imagine. But does their form on the road give you a little bit of hope about Tuesday?
It did until our last away game against Arsenal last weekend. So Yeah, we were atrocious that day, and we were top of the form table for the season before that Arsenal defeat, and that was shocking. And now we're going to a stadium that is notoriously bad for us. So, and against a team that seems to be resurgent in form as well. So, is there any reason for me to be hopeful playing Newcastle away tomorrow night?
They're really good at home. I mentioned that kind of tough period for Eddie Howe of late, and actually, when you look at the overall form of Newcastle United, it's the home form which is kind of propped them up slightly. I think it's 6 on the bounce they've won at home, something like that in all competitions. They're really good at home, even when they're not playing well. And last time out against Man City, it was an absolute tactical masterclass from Eddie Howe. He really ran the book over Pep Guardiola. So we're hoping that he can do that against Thomas Frank and Spurs on Tuesday. And like I say, the history book suggests that it's only going to go one way, because Spurs do not like coming to Tyneside. I mean, what do you think it is? Like, every manager of late just can't seem to get the right result here.
I think it's just that atmosphere, and you get in that zone, don't you? Sometimes, like with Chelsea had and still do have a hoodoo over Spurs for the entirety of the Premier League era, and yeah, going to St James's Park with that. I've spoken a little bit about the disconnect between the fans and the players and the team. You don't seem to ever have that at Newcastle. I might be wrong. I don't follow them religiously, obviously, like people do, but it always feels like that kind of that passion, that tribalism, that desire for the team is always there at Newcastle, and they always show up in their droves. They always get behind the team. They make it incredibly difficult for away teams. And I think probably over the years, that kind of soft Tottenham has always crumbled. It felt like in the last 5-10 years that kind of soft Tottenham had left us. I still don't enjoy going to St James's Park though, and considering we've conceded 11 goals in the last 3 games in all competitions, I'm fearful of how many it might be on Tuesday night.
And will an early goal for Newcastle, obviously that gets the crowd going.
Don't.
but does it? I mean, do the away fans go into that? Obviously, they're not in the best spirits as it is. I mean, I suppose it doesn't even have to be an early goal, does it? It just has to be that first challenge. Are they on edge, do you think, the away fans coming into this game, and it's that first challenge which might just tip them over the edge?
I think the away fans generally are better than the home fans. I think you see that anywhere, don't you? If the home fans can easily get on the backs of the players, but when you go away from home, it's kind of, there's that feeling of we've got to get behind the team. We're smaller in number than the home fans, so we've got to really support the team and get behind the team. And I think the away fans generally do a good job of that. So I don't think they're likely to kind of get on the backs of the players. It's always going to be at home where they'll get on the backs of the players. I don't think they'll do it at St James's Park. So I'm not sure anything like that would tip them over the edge. But as you say, I think they need something to cling on to on Tuesday night to really get them into it from the outset.
And in terms of the player that might be able to give them that, I mean, who is Eddie Howe looking at when he's doing his prep and thinking that's the key man to stop?
Well, if you're looking for a big challenge, Christian Romero is going to do it. He'll do it in the first minute if he needs to. He might not make a clean challenge, but he'll go through someone, I'm sure. I don't know. Because of the way we're playing, we would look at the minute, I think, to a 19-year-old Lucas Bergvall to kind of go out there and make a marauding run forward, or just want the ball in a forward position and take someone on, or just get forward. He was excellent against PSG. I think he showed glimpses against Fulham at the weekend, but didn't quite show what he did against PSG. It's bad though when I'm looking at Lucas Bergvall as a 19-year-old to go and do that, and I'm looking at Archie Gray, who I think has been excellent, and I think I wrote a story about it on Give Me Sport last week, that both of them I think have been criminally underused this season, and they're the future of the club. I think they're the future of the midfield. There's been lots of criticism about kind of Palhinha and Bentancur playing together. Give those two youngsters the chance to shine and a few matches to get used to kind of playing together in that midfield. We have got players who can do it. It's just whether they want to show it, whether they want to be the ones to really go out there and say to the fans, here I am, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive this team forward. We'll have to wait and see.
You kind of know you're nearing a very difficult question, though, when you're calling for youngsters to be used in the midfield. That always is kind of the sign that the the end is nigh, maybe for the manager, isn't it? I mean, this next question could provide an answer which could go on for many, many hours, if not the whole entire afternoon. Give me the main weakness that Newcastle will be looking to exploit.
I'm a big fan. I've generally been a big fan of Pedro Porro, but I think he's had a really poor season so far. So I think you can get at our right back. Who will it be? Harvey Barnes playing out on the left-hand side?
In the eyes of many, it will be, but I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony Gordon came back in. Eddie Howe's got to rotate with the games coming up. But I mean, Barnes is the man in form. He should add 2 against Everton, and he's the man who's been putting them in the back of the net prior to that. So it's maybe it's going to be either Gordon or Barnes. I think many would like to see Barnes play left wing though.
But then what we might see is Thomas Frank go with Jed Spence again at right back, who will probably have a better chance of dealing with Harvey Barnes. But if you've got Pedro Porro at right back and Christian Romero is the right-sided of the 2 centre-backs, Romero's not been brilliant of late either. Made a couple of mistakes in the PSG Champions League game. So you've got to think that Harvey Barnes, if he's going to start, will be licking his lips at getting at those 2 at the right side of the defence. And then who knows what he's going to do with the midfield. If he plays Lucas Bergvall with a Palhinha and an Archie Gray, then I don't think it's weak as such. But knowing Thomas Frank away from home at a difficult stadium against a difficult team in Newcastle, you'll probably see both kind of the double pivot with Palhinha and Bentancur, which the fans will hate right from the very outset. That's not really a massive answer to your question there, but there's weaknesses across that Spurs team at the minute and real fragility, I think.
And in terms of the player from Newcastle that you're fearing the most, who stands out?
Yeah, Barnes has been brilliant. He does stand out for me. Voltemada's gone quiet, hasn't he? Wouldn't surprise me if he popped up with a goal or 2, just because it's against Spurs, and kind of breaks that, not a drought, but he's just not been scoring as freely of late as he was earlier in the season, has he?
He scored a wonderful goal against Everton though on Saturday. Lobbed Pickford. It was quite the finish. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend.
No, I have not seen it. I was kind of out of the football loop at the weekend because it was my wife's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday to her. No, it was a wonderful little lob over Jordan Pickford, which made it all the more sweeter. I think the issue with Voldemort is that he needs either the wingers or a couple of the midfielders to run on beyond him because he's always dropping deep. They did that against Everton. The wingers were there and supported him, which meant he could bring the ball down, bring others into play, and then there was someone that was running on beyond them to get the ball. So if they do that against Spurs, then we should be all right. And
will it be Bruno G and Tonali in the midfield?
Well, again, this is the question. He rested Tonali against Everton, which I was surprised at. I thought he was going to rest anyone. It would be Bruno. It wouldn't surprise us if Bruno was rested against Tottenham and Tonali came back in, and he played Lewis Miley from the off for the first time in quite a while, and he was absolutely superb, a young lad. So I think he should start. And then again, it's just trying to work out what Eddie Howe's doing. I think for the majority of this season, he's been getting to grips with having a squad to rotate. On Saturday, we saw it work for the first time, really. And with Burnley coming up after Spurs, and then the time we had Derby the week after, there's going to have to be an element of rotation to get through because you've also got the League Cup and the Champions League coming up as well. So it's just going to be one of those where you could write down your starting 11 and get it massively wrong because you just don't know what he's going to do because he's got the options to do it. But thankfully on Saturday, everyone that came in did really well. So hopefully everyone's got a bit of momentum in their step, and whoever he decides to play on Tuesday, they'll do right. I think Tonali's a cert though. I think we'll definitely see Tonali in the middle on Tuesday. So he'll have a full engine as well, which is. I think
I said about the kind of the right side of the defence being the weakness. I think if you were to play Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali together, and we see Palhinha and Bentancur play together because that's probably what Thomas Frank will do away from home in a big match. I can only foresee the 2 Newcastle players bullying the 2 Spurs midfielders and getting the better of them throughout the game, and that would be, that would be a fear.
Yeah, I can imagine so. A win would take Newcastle above Tottenham. And before I get your score prediction, I mean, I remember thinking back to that League Cup game and thinking it would be a right test for Newcastle, but it just wasn't. Like, it wasn't the evening that I expected. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts were on that, because I was a little bit shocked at how Spurs came and didn't really do too much.
Yeah. I think we were in that period then where we're kind of trying to work out what Thomas Frank was doing and where he was going. I wasn't too disappointed with that display against Newcastle. Obviously, we could have gone out and really showed a bit more intensity and passion and real drive to go at it, but it's been the story of the Spurs season that's been lacking so far this season.
And that'll lead us nicely into what might happen tomorrow evening, or today, depending on when this goes out. What is going to happen? What's the score prediction going to be?
Do I ever come on this podcast with you and predict anything other than a Tottenham defeat?
I don't think so. I'll have to go back to the records and check, but you're usually quite down the dumps when it comes to which, I have to be honest, isn't always a good thing, because knowing my luck, the footballing gods will be in your favour, even if you do predict a thumping off Newcastle.
So you mentioned that the away form is good, apart from our last away game at Arsenal. So there is a reason.
Derby doesn't. This is what we were discussing on the Monday show, with the next away game having beaten Everton and getting your first win in the league for the first time in 9 months. And you're like, well, you've got to build on it. But then the next away game is Sunderland. So it's like, oh, we're there. Form, everything doesn't really count. And I get what you, but it's Derby, right? I mean, you're not really going to hold them to you're not going to hold them to account in terms of their away form. Like, it doesn't all tally into one, does it?
No, I suppose not. It's a one-off game. It was just the manner of the defeat. Just I think caused consternation amongst the fan base. I wonder if he's going to be caught between a rock and a hard place of trying to appease the fans and be attacking, and go against his kind of who he is and how he is, and being a bit more pragmatic away at Newcastle, and just carrying on what we've done so far away from home. So I'm not going to be overly negative. I'm going to go for a score draw. I think that's an optimistic score draw rather than saying Spurs are going to lose.
And that would be enough to keep him in the job for now?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want him to stay in the job?
I'm not an advocate of changing managers all the time. I look at what Arteta down the road has done. He was given time at Arsenal and kind of trusted the process, as they called it, and look at how he's thriving now. So I would like to back a manager and really, as I say, trust the process that we have in N17. I'm not convinced that Thomas Frank is the man to kind of give that process to.
Final question then, before I do let you get off. I've asked you a couple of times about whether a thumping would lead to him maybe getting the boot. You've said possibly. Do you think is Thomas Frank aware of the pressure? Are the players aware of the pressure? Like, does that impact their approach? It sounds like it must, given that you've just said there you think he might try and appease the fans and go attacking, which is against his natural instinct to do. I'm just wondering, because when a manager knows he's maybe facing the boot, then it does tend to impact what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's. I think he knows he's under pressure. There was some, as I said at the beginning, he's a very affable guy, and comes across very well in interviews and press conferences and stuff like that. And I think we saw him getting spiky for the first time after the game at the weekend. A few questions he didn't like and kind of bit back at reporters. So I think you can clearly see when managers start to feel the pressure, that exterior changes, doesn't it? The kind of how they've been forever and a day can change you when you are feeling the pressure, and it does feel like he is under it at the minute.
Well, as much as I don't like to see managers getting sacked, especially ones like Thomas Frank, who I am a big fan of, if Newcastle can help him on his way by thumping him on Tuesday evening, then I certainly will take that. Lee, thank you very much for popping on. Before we go, just explain to our viewers and listeners what Give Me Sport is and where they can find you guys.
Yeah, givemesport.com for all your kind of not just football needs, but we cover a lot of other sports as well. Focus on Formula One, boxing, and MMA as well. We're quite strong on. We're doing a bit on the Ashes as well with that going on. So yeah, come and give us a look if you're interested in any sports and as much football as you can kind of try and shake a stick at. It's been interesting getting used to. I come from Football London, where we're focusing on on 3 big clubs, and now I'm having to get used to covering the entirety of the UK again. But yeah, it's been good. So yeah, I don't want to take people away from Reach too much, but yeah, if you're interested, come and have a look.
Yeah, and if it's been led by Lee, then it's always going to be good content to go and do have a Deeks. Lee, thank you as always for popping on and providing the insight into Tottenham. To you guys watching and listening, do get into the comments. Let us know your thoughts on Newcastle United's game coming up against Spurs. What's the score going to be? Let me know. Enjoy the game, and I'll see you guys very soon.